Hi, Anil joining.
Hey Anil, hey on.
Hello. Is Yogesh on the call? Okay, I think we have enough people here. Sorry, I'm behind in the time, back-to-back meetings. I can share where we left last time. I didn't get a chance to really do any more work since last meeting, but we can use this time to kind of continue discussing the comments that already are there in the document. So let me share. Can you see what I'm sharing?
Yes. Hey everyone. I sorry I couldn't hear things until now. I hope I didn't miss much. But is everyone here? Can we hear each other?
Yeah, I can hear you,
Yes.
Drew.
Cool. And I think I saw
Yeah.
John Pando. Awesome to see you, John.
Yes, it's been a while, Drew.
I know, too long.
All
So,
right.
Anil, while we have John here, can I just ask a quick question? Um, Anil, you had asked earlier about could we, we had talked about Google's PCIe driver and how they were, um, making some improvements that would be good to connect to RASDaemon. Um, and so I don't know how to proceed with this, but John is the one doing that work, and I think you are one of Microsoft. I've checked is interested in in seeing the repository and working with you all because we have some uses of Linux as well, and I know that uh, that Meta uses Linux. So I mean, Anil, do you mind if we just take a quick second to talk to John while he's here?
Yeah, absolutely.
And
So
just because I remember your request.
yeah. So yeah, I mean, a very high level, right, John? I think I'm not sure if you have seen the work we've been doing here in documenting the in-band RAS requirements on top of the out-of-band requirement that we already have.
No, I
Believe.
haven't. Actually, I was wondering before you start forgive me, I'm really not that familiar with OCP practices or whatnot, but how do I get access to this document?
You should be able to sign up. If Yogesh is here, he
Well,
would be able to help you offline.
just hit share. You can just share it. Just hit share,
Yeah.
and
Tell
then
me
type,
your email address, John.
well, just type
Uh,
JON and it may come up. Oh, it
Probably
did.
not. I don't think I've been shared on the other ones. Just PANDOH.
There's
Um,
no John in front.
yeah, just PANDOH at google.com.
Is it correct?
Yep, that's correct. Thank you.
Okay, and I'm so sorry. I don't mean to distract, but since John is here, that ties into this document, and John, maybe we need an offline discussion, but I think we would like to collaborate with you to, like learn if you can get an early picture of your repo or, an early drop or something. That
Yeah,
would,
that's actually the reason I came here. I heard from Clint, a mutual friend, that Meta and I guess Microsoft were also interested. So
it was me. I reached out on behalf of Anil. Anil pinged me and said, "Hey, can we do this?"
yeah. So that's why I decided to drop in today and see if there's some way that we could work together.
Yeah, absolutely. So at a very high level, right? This is the block diagram that kind of provides a high level picture of where the in-band error handling or error flows um, described. So if you look at here, CPU and directly attached memory, any of the error event that are propagated through the CPU comes to the kernel, right? So PCI AER is one example. And then from the kernel, the trace buffer is the mechanism that is propagated to the some kind of plugin. So RAS daemon is one example. Dmessage, sysfs, when whatever service is registered here will pick that trace,
Right.
right? So we want to leverage on existing kernel implementation and then build on top of that. So the standardization that we are looking at is through this RAS plugins,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
right? And then the in-band management agent, this is kind of hyperscalers secret sauce, you can call, but it need to rely on some standard interfaces to work with the platform, the rest of the platform. So that's where this the AER handler, existing AER handler, any improvement that you're working on would be very handy to understand the kind of work that you're doing and how we can leverage on that.
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah. I'm planning to send an RFC to the upstream mailing list. So that should be, I guess folks can sort of look out for that in the next, I think, month or two.
Okay. Are you planning to upstream it to the main kernel repository or something?
To the main kernel repository there. That's correct.
So one FYI, one thing what we did, so we worked on a RAS daemon and modifying that and upstreaming it. But what we did was to make life simple and get it out faster. We used the HPC community's fork, and upstreaming there became much easier for us. So just a thought, in case you're getting some pushback or slowing down, then you could use that approach also. I can share with
Gotcha.
you.
Yeah,
I can
yeah.
share.
I had some earlier discussions with Bjorn, the PCIe maintainer, on design and other stuff, and I got some early sign off. So, yeah, I'll keep that in mind. Should upstreaming be more of a hassle?
Yeah, yeah, awesome. And maybe in next future meeting, if you can come and share with us maybe some summary of what are the key features or changes you're proposing, just to educate us, that'll be awesome.
Sure. I thought that I had maybe you weren't in attendance. I did share around or disseminated I think a design doc um, uh, on some of the features I was proposing earlier on. I don't know, Drew, did you share that with the OCP or?
Yeah, I did, and you know like I think you can share it again if you want. Just to paste the link in. There was for there, I think there was a copy for public comment or something that we made. But I think Anil was also asking, can we see code, early? Um,
Yeah,
you,
so this is the Google Drive, right? And you can either upload here, um, or you can send it to Drew, and Drew, you can upload it here. Either way, it's okay.
Yeah, Drew, just for my understanding, is your email acwalton at Microsoft msft.com or
no, it's
Microsoft.com?
Drew Walton at Microsoft.com, all
I
one
see.
word.
Okay.
So, hey, John and Drew, I just joined. I was having some difficulties. John and Drew, if you don't mind, can you share the link to the document or what John is referring to shared
Well,
with the
I can't. I'm no longer at Google, but that's what we're talking about. John's working with John.
I understand, but John, I'm trying to figure out what John is referring to. Can we share the link to that, John or Drew?
Well, it's just we're talking about his proposal to
Yeah,
with the PCI driver proposal we looked at months
yeah.
ago. So basically, what it showed was it showed the like how John was extending the Linux PCIe driver to use trace points and some other things, and
Yeah, I
so
remember that one, Drew. Did we upload it to the OCP drive? Do you have a link to that, Drew, by any chance?
well, I'll
I
go
think
back and look. I'm having to rediscover everything. I'm not sure.
maybe easier for John. John, do you have a link like Anil was suggesting? Can you upload that maybe again, or if it's already there, share the link.
I can try to find. I think there was Drew and I had worked on like a sanitized version for public comment. So let me try and find that, and I'll put that as an action item for myself.
Yeah,
Before the
it'll probably be in your email. With the something that I sent when I was at Google. So
yeah.
uh, it's so ironic. It was so hard. It's so hard to find anything now. Um, that's been the hardest part about changing companies. But I don't. I'm looking at the share drive, and I see a copy of. No, I see a copy of the spreadsheet. I don't see a copy of your proposal off the top of my head.
Okay. Could someone paste the link to the shared drive? I again, sorry, OCP newbie. I don't really know what that is. Could someone just paste a link to the shared
Yeah,
drive in
it's a
the chat?
Google Drive. Sure.
Thank you.
I mean, this is the work in progress folder. That's where I would expect it to be.
Gotcha.
Since
Yeah, I don't have access to that. I don't know why. I just requested access, so whoever's the folder
oh,
owner, um, um,
uh, I don't. I think it's. I think it is that you, Yogesh.
anyway, I'm sure it'll get sorted out by the by next meeting, and I'll make sure to upload a copy of that.
Awesome.
But by the next time we
Yeah,
meet.
thanks, John. That you
Yeah.
have.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I think I also requested. I haven't been here in a while, so I was sort of wanted to look up at Irwin's Irwin, the latest progress on Irwin's like OCP PCIe error list. I think that also is in that drive as well. So
It is, and if you
Yeah,
look, there's
that's the same place, and I think just a quick comment on that spreadsheet. I think we pretty much got close to finalizing the prioritization on that. And it's a good open or it's a good kind of segue that you brought in, John. If everyone feels that we need to come back to that, I can ask Arvin to join back, or we can do it amongst ourselves. But I thought that was pretty close to finalized, where we did have a few companies or people who owned to drive what was on the high priority list. If anyone who doesn't think that, if anyone wants to bring back something that is not that is high priority but not uh, signed up by someone to drive at SIG PCI, then we should revisit that.
yeah, and we should check. I think we should probably just check in periodically to see if we're making any progress on those action items we took. Right?
Yeah, that's a good idea. Maybe that could be done via email, or if you think, Drew, we can have it as an agenda item once in a while. But I just want to make sure that we are not dropping anything that was high priority on that list, and someone is driving it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. So Anil, I apologize for diverting you a little bit, but I was actually following up on your action item you gave me. So
Yeah, that's good. So once John has access to the drive, he can upload it, and then either next week meeting or following future meeting, we can have him John come in and review it with us.
awesome.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right.
Thank-
Yeah. So let's continue. Last week we took some action items. I honestly was not able to finish all my action item. I did some cleanup work based on the feedback. For example, I cleaned up some of the definition where there was ambiguity about customer and user. So I cleaned that up here. So please take a look at it. And if you have any additional comments, feel free to add here. And so and I don't see any other more follow-up. Anybody else made any further edits as a result of the discussion last week? We can go over those first.
I haven't made any new edits, but remember we have one paragraph to review right below the diagram, just the description.
Okay,
of the
let's go through
diagram.
that. Yeah, let's
Yeah.
go through that right now because we didn't
there are
get a
lots
chance.
of comments and they may take a long time. Last time we took the whole meeting with just few comments, right?
Yes. So I think this is what you're referring to, right?
Yeah. The one
Okay.
below that.
Yeah. So let's walk through this one, right? So just to provide the context to the rest of the team, once we have this high-level block diagram, we wanted to kind of describe in a little more detail what all these boxes means and what the context of these arrows and the flow. So Shubhada took a initial stab at it. So this is what Shubhada has written down. So Shubhada, go ahead, please walk us through.
Yeah, so I'm just describing the diagram as, from bottom to up, right? So the figure shows the in-band components and the out-of-band components at high level. And the hardware components, it is CPU, memory, and devices are the sources of errors and events. So that's where everything starts. Based on the firmware first or the OS first policy, the error or events could be handled by firmware, such as SMM or embedded microcontroller. So here, if you look at the left side of the diagram, right, the left block. So it's just mentioning that based on either if you have firmware first or OS first, the events could be handled by that firmware block or by the OS level driver or kernel, right? Okay, what I meant was firmware, and firmware can include SMM or some embedded microcontroller, and by software such as drivers or OS kernel. So I'm just talking about firmware first model, and examples of firmware are SMM and embedded microcontroller firmware, and examples of software or high-level software is kernel or device drivers, right? Okay. And in this diagram, we propose that the IME should be isolated from the details of the vendor-specific hardware components, and an abstraction layer such as RAS API be added, which can provide the error data as well as path for RAS actions. So the API's job is to provide the path for error data as well as for RAS action. So that's, and it connects directly to IMA as shown on the top of the block. Okay, and the kernel handles the errors and events based on the notification and logging mechanism that is standardized. The output of the kernel layer is also standardized in CPER format. So, all the error data that's coming out is standardized, and the expectation is that it is in CPER format. Similarly, device drivers expose the error data to the IMA in a standardized format and satisfying the requirement for software scalability for the hyperscaler infrastructure. So that also goes to IMA in a standardized manner. I don't know whether today we have CPER logging from drivers to the IMA, but that's something we may have to discuss a little bit more. I mean, for Windows, right, there is like VIA, which is standardized, but I don't know if Linux does the same or not. So maybe that's something to talk about. And lastly, the invent driver also provides a path for RAS actions. And examples of RAS drivers and plugins are RAS daemon, EDAC driver, or RAS API driver, which is still to be defined, but it's just an example, like what would be the standardized entity that would be handling this interface.
Quick question. So at that level, the drivers, will there be standardization, or what do you expect there? I mean, you've got the interfaces standardized. What gets standardized in the driver?
Yeah. So the driver to the IMA is standardized, right? Like what you expose through from the driver to the IMA is standardized. However, the transport layer could be anything. I think that's what we kind of converged on in the RAS API also, right? That your transport layer, such as like, say, for example, for out-of-band PLDM or for in-band, you can use ACPI or CCI. That is the driver is going to be specific to that, right? If you're using CCI, the driver is going to be specific to that. But what's coming out of that, like a CPER record that goes to the IMA, that's going to be standardized. So
in other words, Dean, this is aligned with the mindset that what needs to be delivered to the CSPs is uniform in terms of the CPER records. How it is done, it's up to the vendors, and they can pick CCI or PLDM for their transport layer, and accordingly the driver will be formatted.
Right. Yeah. The driver is.
So the information is the format is standard. The functionality of the driver will support RAS API, but the definition of the driver and what it can do, that's not standard, right? That's whatever people want to provide, isn't it?
That's true. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I misunderstood.
Yeah.
And that's actually really key, Dean, is that we want to, the plumbing should not be special. The RAS API is about plumbing, but then we want you to be able to compete on RAS features and how well you log things and how well different CPUs can diagnose problems.
Good. I'm on board now. I was out of sync.
Yeah, this is very, very important. Thanks, Drew. And I'd like to hear from Vilas also. Vilas, any objections to that proposal at all?
I do have a question. Can you go back to the drawing for a sec?
Yeah.
Why is the RAS API line between the driver and the IMA, but on the right-hand side, it's between the kernel and this plugin? Why isn't it up to the IMA?
This line here?
Well, the one on the right side.
Right here?
Yeah. Why isn't that RAS API? Why is it?
Oh, that should also be. right? Maybe it is.
It's a hard figure to draw. Vilas, a good point. It's a hard figure to draw.
Yeah.
No, I can put that. I think there was a discussion. Initially I had it here, but then we had a discussion where we want to standardize from the kernel itself ability to use the RAS API interface, and then the RAS plugin is where there is some vendor specific code, and then the hyperscaler code will be integrated. And this interface we thought will leave it open, means hyperscaler specific, as long as there is a standardization at this layer here.
I don't understand that.
Mm.
I mean, I thought the whole point was to standardize the plumbing out to the hyperscaler, right, to the IMA.
Yeah, so I mean, we could put RAS API into, we could put this here also. It's just that that was the context why we moved that to above the kernel, because we wanted to standardize. We want to see the data coming out of the kernel or the interfaces are already RAS API compliant.
Why?
No, that doesn't make sense, right? Like from kernel to the plugin. Yeah, you don't want it. Doesn't need to be standardized, right?
I see. Yes, that's the way I was drawing it before, right? But then I think we had a discussion. I completely forgot the context of why we put the RAS API here. And in fact, this RAS API also.
I have a question about that. Actually, I had added that while assuming that you are making the hardware abstraction layer, right? So the hardware is exposing the RAS API, right? Like, or the content that is expected from the RAS API. So in that case, should that label be there or not? So I added it. I wanted to ask that question here, because even though the transport is kind of not standardized, the API is basically between like the hardware and IMA, right? So it's like end to end. So that's why I added it there, but I would like feedback here that do we want to see it that way, or we just start from the plugin layer?
Are you saying that the hardware provides the RAS API?
I thought the RAS API working group explicitly went away from that direction.
Hardware may or may not provide for RAS API, Dean. And that's why I made the comment, it's a hard figure to draw.
We can call it optional, right? We can call it optional if you think that.
Again, the essence is what to deliver to the upper layer, not how. Now, what could reside in your hardware implementation in silicon or in your firmware, it just is flexible.
Okay, that's good. If you make a requirement that it must be the hardware, then there's a problem. But what you just described is fine, and it gives companies a chance to differentiate.
Yeah, at least at this high level, I want to keep this pretty much as a legacy interface that exists today, rather than putting some requirement that the kernel need to then interface with RAS API. I don't know if that's the really intent here. I think what you're referring Yogesh and Subhadai, that this kind of pass through so that the in-band agent is able to talk to through APIs.
Yes.
Right, and that messages will kind of flow through to the hardware. Now, how the translation happens, that's with the plugin. So I think the plugin is where the translation will happen, and then it will interface with the existing kernel flows.
Yeah, I mean that RAS API label there, right? It's basically optional. You can directly have a mapping, or it could be through firmware, or it could even be at higher level, right? So, but then it's basically end to end. We are expecting information from the hardware to be exposed through RAS API. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not attached to it. We can remove that label, but it's it kind of made things clearer for me if I see it bottom up.
Well, I mean, I think the intent here is that the interface to the IMA is standardized as the RAS API. Everything below that is one example of how the data can get from the devices or the CPU and memory to the IMA, right? It doesn't have to follow any of those paths necessarily, right? Am I correct in that?
Yeah, that actually matches my thought. Is it's plumbing, right? And it's the plumbing at the end, and what you do behind the plumbing is up to you.
So
Yeah.
I'm okay to kind of remove it, and maybe we can write one sentence, Shubhata, to kind of give a clarity as a example scenario, right? And then there you can talk about it.
Yeah, I think what can be clarified is that the plugins or the transport layers, it could be, purely software-based firmware or hardware, right? It can be the implementation choice, but the standardization is between the IMA and the system, right?
And a
Yeah.
question about plugins, is there some significance to that term? Does it imply some sort of interface or environment or standardization, or does it just mean sort of application layer code?
Like a daemon, most likely
Daemons.
daemon.
Oh, okay. So plugin doesn't mean it has to fit into Java or some special environment. It's just functionality.
Oh yeah, it's functional.
But
Like
at the end of the day, we want to make a RAS API call on whatever CPU comes along, and something responds. So there has to be some standard way of discovering the API and calling it. That's the only way we can have standard plumbing. And
Yeah.
and what you do on the other end of that API is fine, but do whatever. But if it's an AMD CPU or an ARM CPU or an Intel CPU or a GPU, we should be able to call this API. So there has to be something.
API,
standard.
yes, but plugin, you're not going to write one plugin and expect it to run on all those different platforms.
Well,
No.
I want to call the API, and then there's stuff behind the plugin that knows how to talk to each of the error sources.
Yeah,
Yeah.
plugin will
Yeah,
have
each
some
plugin would
variation.
mean like the transport that you're trying to use, right? So for inbound, you're going to use either like ACPI. So say you decided to do some RAS action and you have defined an opcode in the RAS API, and that could either go over ACPI, it could either go over CCI and take the RAS action, right? So the plugin is mostly about the transport that talks to the hardware, and the API is going to standardize what we are expecting, right? Like the standardized.
I think that would be clearer, Shibata, if the RAS plugin box was entirely in the green vendor code box. Because I think that matches what you just said.
The reason why we put it in between, there was a discussion we had, right? That some part of that is interfacing the IMA is standardized. There's a thin layer of RAS API commands and opcodes that would be standardized, and the rest would be vendor specific based on the transport.
But that's the API, right? I mean, the code would be provided by the vendor to interface to the API.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, so the API line could just be that standardization
That's
layer.
right.
But yeah,
Yeah,
sorry,
I'm
what was
okay with
the
that.
comment here to kind of put this everything put this RAS plugin fully in the green box?
That's right. Right, and I think that would address Dean's concern was you're not expecting a single plugin to work with all vendors, right? And if you just put that, red box in the green box, then it's very clear that.
Yeah, then
No,
I
in
like that
fact,
because then you
that's,
call.
No, that could be problematic actually. That RAS plugin before was wasn't it RAS daemon, Anil?
Yeah, I mean, I was using RAS daemon as an example, right? So there's a RAS daemon which has a vendor-specific code, but it is upstreamed, right? So the intent is that these plugins should be upstreamed, that a hyperscaler can integrate into their software stack along with IMA. And those plugins, when they're upstream, it will have some vendor-specific code and some standardized interfaces that do not change. And RAS daemon is kind of one example you can call it. Like the RAS daemon has a standard way of calling, right? And
The problem I'm trying to point out is, and Vilas, I'd like to hear from you also. What we're trying to prescribe here is something that's provided by silicon vendors, but it's actually a kernel layer glue logic.
So your concern is that, or rather, like say two vendors decide to use the same path, that is still upstreamable. It's not really vendor specific.
It's not the vendor specificity, it's about who does actually provide that, right? Because we've been very clear about who provides what.
Well, I mean, I guess I'm not following Yogesh, because my understanding is what you want the vendor to provide is a thing that has this RAS API interface to the IMA. That thing could directly be the hardware. It could be some firmware. It could go through the kernel and use some existing code, and that's all a vendor choice. Right?
So as long as if it is restricted to that RAS API functionality, in other words, to mailboxes for in-band and out-of-band, I am okay with that. But when it gets to larger than that in terms of RAS daemon kind of agent, then we need to talk about that.
So one thing I don't quite understand about your comment, Vilas, was if we have all of, I guess, would the RAS API plug into ACPI or RAS daemon in a way that it just worked? I guess what I'm wondering is I get a new CPU that says it supports RAS API. I would expect I have to do no additional work to plumb the errors to something that's collecting them and logging them to my infrastructure.
I mean, that's not my exact understanding of how this would work, right? I think no existing work being no modifications to the IMA, but if I give you a CPU that I say supports the RAS API, I might give you some kernel patches and or some, user code to run that actually shims that support, right?
Okay.
No, but Vilas, there is a second level of standardization here, right? The RAS plugins could also be standardized where you could use like PLDM or you could use ACPI, and there should be no additional work for some other vendor who made a choice to choose a certain RAS plugin, right?
No, yeah. I agree that it could be done in a way that requires no additional work, right? I'm not saying that would never be the case. I'm just saying that that's not I don't believe that we're stating that as a requirement.
Why we're not
let,
saying that? I mean,
let me give a very just specific example. Let's assume that Intel comes up with some, whiz bang new extension to the machine check architecture, right? Like, you don't want, I don't think we want this document to prevent that, right?
So
An example would be
I
the
just,
Yeah,
I
I
just,
mean, I agree with that.
Is
So-
there more, Vilas? Because I'm sensing there should be more there, right?
Should be more aware, sorry.
So, okay. Providing a new machine check.
Yeah,
So example would be like for the EDAC driver, you know, each time you have a new CPU that comes out, that needs to be updated. I think that's the way I'm looking at it from what Vilas is saying.
right. It could be, right? It doesn't have to be,
Right.
but it could be, but it would still then talk RAS API to the IMA.
So purely at software level, you would have some translation and you would do that.
I mean, that's
And
the
nothing
that's a
stops
choice.
you. Yeah,
That's a choice, right? It could be purely at the software level. It could be a hardware interface to device firmware. Like that's all a choice, right?
right. And that makes it adoptable or implementable at any given point, right? Because then you can just use what you've been doing and then or make a change to standardize the second level.
So,
yeah, I think the
so
important thing is not to break the isolation, right, of the data center management software is what we're trying to protect. And as long as you're not breaking that, right, in the lower layers, you could make changes. But right, those changes will not percolate all the way up to the RAS API into the hyperscaler software. Because the minute you break that layer, right, and you have to rewrite the data center management software, then that's our ROI, right? That's where we're getting the benefit. If you do it below that layer, you're doing all the changes. It's fine. We can change our hardware and move things to a firmware from a hardware or the other way around, and that's fine. It won't change the RAS API. But I think a good way of looking at it is, as long as the data center management software doesn't have to change, you're fine. That's what we're protecting, right?
Well, and I guess if you make it so that I have to do a complicated kernel update, and I could conceive of ways that you update the things DLOS talked about where you make it painful, but do that at your own risk, right? If you make a change, if you say I'm getting rid of machine check registers today and none of your kernels work, none of your old kernels work, and we're not updating them, there may be problems. So, I think I agree with what you're saying generally, Antonio, but I would just urge the other CPU vendors to be nice to us and don't be too brutal with everything you're changing. So that
But Drew,
that
that point you just made is orthogonal to this. This is the in-band management for higher layer fault management, and what you just described is handling in the kernel. And you're right. You don't don't break stuff because backwards compatibility is important. But as long as you provide the same interface here, things can happen under the covers, and interface is different than functionality. So companies can add functionality.
yeah, I'm totally
as
in
long as they
line with
support
you
the
on that.
interface. Okay.
I totally align with you. I've been a huge proponent of enabling new functionality. I'm just trying to talk about what's my experience. Like I'm thinking about how much work does it take when I get a new product to get that in my data center. And I agree with Antonio's point that mostly we want to make it easy on the hyperscalers infrastructure because that is hard to change and has a lot of history. It's just not something that's that nimble. But I'm saying you could make it hard for us to integrate your products if you make other changes too. So just be aware.
Yeah, I think that's fine, right? I mean, allowing vendors to compete means also allowing vendors to screw up, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you might, and you may pay for it, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Cool. I think so. In the interest of time now, so looks like we are converging to call this RAS plugins as vendor specific within the vendor's code domain. with the RAS API interface to the IMA.
Domain, what does that mean? The color, what does that color mean?
This color or this color?
The reddish beige color, what does that mean? Who provides it?
I was using this color to distinguish vendor specific code, and I think this green color could be
Green
removed
color
now.
very clearly says vendor code, right?
Yeah. So I mean, there is no really, I don't see any distinction between this color and the vendor code.
So the
I don't know.
drivers,
I
plugin,
think
all of that is vendor code. Part of vendor code is what you're trying to say, Anil.
Yeah, I mean that's the context here. But I see your point that there is a green color here, which is vendor code, and then there's an orange color, light orange color, which is also in the.
so that's similar to the device driver, right? And it kind of makes sense that it could
Yeah.
be kind of a standard or completely vendor specific, but vendor is actually
Right.
Implementing that
Yeah.
layer.
Maybe one way to look at this one, right? At least from my point of view, what I've seen so far, we expect the device drivers to be upstream.
Mhm.
Okay, at least a standard version, and then there could be some
Sure,
plugins
I agree
to
with
that, right?
yeah.
So similarly, this RAS plugins are need to be upstream, right? Now you
So
can say,
you really want to look at the RAS plugin as an equivalent to device driver, but for CPU and memory and logs for that vendor, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Now kernel also is, but kernel actually is kind of completely open source, right?
Yeah, kernel. We can leave that out because there's a lot more in kernel than just what to interpret from CPU and memory. But one thing we do need to explicitly identify, I believe, is in devices. You are implying GPUs. Is that 800-pound gorilla in the room? We need to call that out.
Which one? Sorry.
You when you say devices, you mean GPUs included, right?
That's right.
Well, it could be a mix.
We need to call that out.
Call that what? Devices, example, GPU?
Like
Yeah, including GPUs.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But that's just an example, right? Because if you have an offloads accelerator, some sort of.
It is, but it's not just any example, Drew. It's a big example. It covers a lot today. It's the reality of our times, right?
Well,
Like
I
that?
guess I've had a lot of pain from offload accelerators too. So,
So what do you want to call that?
You just call GPUs.
I mean, I'd prefer it if the figure just said devices. If there was a line of text that said, some example devices include, GPUs and offload accelerators. I think that would be.
Yeah. I think that's a good way to keep it simple. And what I'm suggesting is, right after this description, I'm thinking that let's put one or two sentences for each of the box. And
the reason let me tell that the reason is if we do not, OCP is working in parallel on GPU RASPEC, and Anil and Drew and Vilas, you all are part of that, right? We do need to be explicit about this initiative, working with that initiative.
Agreed.
Right?
I can commit to you that I will push that hard.
Yeah. So that's fair, and we can describe that in right after this paragraph when we describe what this devices box means, right? And we can also clarify that some of the high-level requirements are being developed as a part of a separate initiative, and we can put a pointer there.
Yeah, and Yogesh, I'm strongly aligned with you on that, but I just think that we don't want to put it in the drawing. We want the RAS API to be lots of devices, more than GPUs, but include GPUs.
That's fine with me.
So, yeah, let's keep it devices here, right? Let's not put any specific name here that becomes questionable, and then it'll simply clutter this block diagram and will not add any new information, right? for the context of the in-band management and out-of-band management, clarifying that coexist in the infrastructure, right? Just keeping devices good enough. And the reason we are separating the devices with CPU because this is the kind of host management, this is all the rest of the infrastructure, the rest of the components within the system, right? So I think it's okay to distinguish between these two boxes. And so would it make sense to start maybe write few sentences for each of the box?
Mhm.
Like we just talked about, what, you know, the RAS plugin, what that really means. And also I'm thinking that each of the arrow, maybe we can call out like 1, 2, 3, 4 as a naming number and then describe each of the arrow also what that really means. Would that make sense? Because we are talking, we have our own interpretation of each of this arrow, but someone looking, you know, first time may not have the full context.
Numbering sounds a little bit, I mean, usually numbers are associated with flow, right? So I'm just wondering numbers will work or not. But probably,
like
I
this.
mean, the connection between the boxes can be explained, right? So that
Yeah,
should be fine.
I'm not saying to each and every row, but the line, but at least some of the, you know, key interfaces that that would be good to kind of clarify. So, for example, this particular arrow, right? What this really means? What is flowing through this arrow? What is the intent of this?
Yeah, no, Anil, I agree with your point, right? It's useful, but numbers do indicate a flow, so but figuring out a way to label the arrows would be good.
Yeah, I'm just thinking right now to do like this, but if you have any suggestion,
Or maybe
like,
color coding might help.
or color coding, yeah, color coding is fine too. I'm okay with that. Should I do color coding? I can do that.
Yeah, color coding will be better.
Okay, then I think this should be described, right? Actually, sorry, now we are at the top of the hour.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just extend that description and, you know, describe each block and communication between the two. And if people can review that offline, that may be better.
Awesome. I'm going to put your name here, Shubhada, if that's okay with you.
Okay.
Sorry, Shubhada. I will also add few other boxes, blocks that I can think of. And anyone else who has some interest and some interesting thoughts, please add your thoughts here and by adding the box. And then we can continue reviewing it next week. Yogesh, from a timeline point of view, looks like we have a pretty short window now, right?
Yeah, I think for I believe you're talking about the global summit, right?
Mm-hmm. I think practically speaking, I'm not sure we can call this as 1.0. I mean, sorry,
Not 1.0, but if we want to say, so two things, right? We said 1.0 on out of band, but I believe we should do joint for both out of band and in band, just because the refinements we are making apply for both. But I'm open. We can call it 0.5 for in band and then merge it back with 2.0 for in band and out of band. That's a path for us. But again, I'm open to listen to everyone else's opinion.
Yeah, my suggestion would be that after we add some more clarity and we believe that it's enough clarity here, then we just start merging it and then call that one dot, rather than releasing this document as it is, right? I'm not sure it makes sense.
So you're suggesting, just to be clear, you're suggesting release invent proposal at say 1.0.9 or whatever you feel comfortable with, and then later on merge the two in and out of band if we feel that's the right thing to do, and call it whatever 2.0.
No. What I'm saying is that once maybe in the next couple of meetings, right, we will have a fairly good understanding, and most of the ambiguities are resolved, and for the comments, then take this content, merge it into our parent 1.0 document.
Okay,
Okay, and then release as a 1.5.
that's fine.
I don't think we can release that before Global Summit.
We can probably try. We can probably do it.
Let's try, yeah, but I'm not going to promise that because there's so
Sure.
many priorities going on.
You
But
you're the boss on that to give it a go or not go. Okay.
Yeah. And then, but at the summit, we definitely can talk about it, that this is the direction we are going. And like, for example, we can.
We have like 10 minutes, not much to talk.
Yeah. So like, for example, throwing this block diagram and saying that, look.
Yeah, tease them with that, but I do plan to have a virtual deep dive after the summit.
Sure. Yeah, we can kind of give the direction that provide a clarity to the rest of the community, right? That this is something we already discussed, released 1.0, and now we are working on this one as 1.5, and it's coming in the future, right? Something like that.
Yeah, and I'm gonna miss y'all this year in the summit. So Vilas, I'm just relying on your virtual shaking the martini this year.
All right.
Where are you heading?
All right. Thanks all.
All right.
Thank you.
See you.
All right. See y'all later.
Great
Thank
weekend.
you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye now.